And 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Welcome back to another installment of Ask Eddie and Anne.
Hi.
And it's funny, whenever we start, we're always kind of chuckling, and people must wonder, like, what the heck is so funny, But anyway, say lovey.
Say Lippy.
So, Anne, bring me up to speed. When is this episode actually airing, if we can say that?
This is going to air on February 2nd. So
February
after
2nd.
our festival in Oakland closes and before Seattle opens.
Okay, very good. Very good. And
The
here
nice mug.
people can see this nice coffee mug here, the Noir City coffee mug, which will be available. Okay, so we are actually recording this right in the middle of the Noir City Film Festival in Oakland. Yeah. It has been going on this is the 8th day of the festival. I'm getting slightly punchy at this point. You get to the point where I fear I'm going to go out and introduce the wrong movie, which I did before we had showrunners and all that kind of stuff. I did one night go out and introduce the wrong movie, and the whole audience started screaming at me like, "Wake up, dummy!"
Well, my friend Nathan and I got the schedule wrong, and we thought that wrong number was tonight. And then he texted me going, no, it's Raw Deal. I'm like, oh, Raw Deal.
Yeah, it's interesting because at a certain point, and it is so fabulous to see people who come like every single night.
Yeah.
They see every movie, and it does sort of alter your brain because by the 7th or 8th night, it's sort of noir delirium sets in a little bit, and it's not a bad thing.
Yeah, and I think this is the most I've gone in a while to North City. I mean, I always go, but I think because I'm going with someone else who's really enthusiastic, it's been really nice. It's sort of like I'm kind of pushing more to see more things.
Right. And I will say it's been very, very gratifying. The show has gone extremely well. The greatest takeaways for me, number one, is how many people have come from distance.
Yeah.
I mean, it's remarkable. Florida, Maine, New York, New Jersey, Georgia, South Dakota, Canada, Texas, Fabulous Joe and Ruth, who were just, I loved meeting them, and just people from all over. And it's extremely gratifying because, when somebody approaches me and just wants to say hello or something, and then I say, "Oh, what's your name and where are you from?" And it is amazing when they say, "Oh, I came from Des Moines." And it's like, holy cow. And of course, you saw my post where I hope, gently chastising the San Franciscans who felt it was too far to cross the Bay Bridge to get to the festival. And it was like, wow, people have come from across the United States and across the ocean, and it's like too much to cross the Bay Bridge. But oh well. I think when the word gets out about how good the experience is, because a lot of people in the Bay Area have never been to the Grand Lake Theater. Yeah. And so there were also, in addition to the people who came great distance, there were also people who came from the North Bay and the South Bay. I talked to people from San Jose and from Woodside and from Palo Alto, from Marin County, from Sonoma, who made that drive because the theater is just right off the freeway. Yeah. Right off the 580, and it's just that it's just been great, and everybody has had a really, really good time. So I'm very happy about that, and I assume that once we have dispelled all these absurd notions about, ooh, it's in Oakland, silly. So I think it'll just be. I mean, the houses have been great. They're not like complete sellouts, but they've really been good audiences, man. When you draw 450 people during the week on a Tuesday night. That's I don't think there's any other screen in the Bay Area drawing 450 people on a Tuesday night.
Yeah, I was really pleased by how many people were showing up during the weeknights. Like it was a really good sized crowd, which made me really happy. And yeah, I finally did, because I've been taking Bart over, but I did do the other day the NL bus, and that was really easy. And it drops you like 2 blocks from the theater. And that was like, it was interesting too, because it was like there's hardly anybody on the bus, and it was just really a good experience. And it's always fun to go to the Transbay terminal. Because
Yeah, well,
it's
it's
amazing what sales, with the money from Salesforce, how well that turned out.
yes, and it's interesting how it's a mindset, because there are people who will take public transportation and there were people who would never take public transportation,
Yeah.
which I learned very, very young, because that was my household. My father, this may come as a shock, my father did not drive.
Yeah.
Never drove a car. He was in a very serious car accident when he was young, and it just spooked him. He never got behind the wheel of a car ever. He took public transportation or got rides from his cronies everywhere he went. My mother never took public transportation once in her entire life. She would not lower herself to get on a bus with the riffraff, and my dad like was the riffraff. So it was just really interesting. And so I've had no since I have dutifully tried to follow in my father's footsteps, I have absolutely no problem with public transportation. But I luck out, because now that we're in Oakland, it takes me like 10 minutes to get to the theater, and I just drive myself there, and yeah. I always in fact, Ann and I have gotten the same parking space every night. And it was not planned. It's just there. It's just available. So I now I head right to it, and it's like, there it is. It's open. So
yeah, and the parking is definitely better than the parking in the Castro. And also, it's because I live in the Tenderloin. Actually, yeah, I mean, getting back from the Castro at night, it was always kind of a pain in the ass. The one thing about San Francisco that I would like to see change is how much public transport they ran at night. And also same thing with Bart. Bart really needs to be open later. But oh well. But I know that they're having, public transport is also expensive to run. And it would be good if people used it more, because that would really help with keeping it going. But yeah, I don't know, because I spent my high school years in London, so of course I took public transport everywhere, and I didn't actually learn how to drive until I was like 21 or 22. And one of the reasons why I moved to San Francisco is I just wanted to live in a city where I didn't have to have a car, because that was just never something that I really liked, because I think I just, to me, I've always preferred public transport.
Right. Yeah, it's like living in Manhattan. It's like, why fuss with the car? It's just a total headache, which I totally get and respect. But there are ways to get across the bay to do something, and it's really been great. I've had several people tell me who came from out of town, like it's really the first time they've spent any amount of time in Oakland, and they were really digging it, like appreciating how. Well, there's more of a bohemian vibe in Oakland now than there used to be, because all those people got moved out of San Francisco.
Yeah, no, it's true.
With the tech boom, the artist crowd kind of moved across the bay where it was a little cheaper. So it has definitely changed the vibe in Oakland, and it's good. It's a good working class town with a real nice mix of people. So
yeah, and that neighborhood by the theater is really nice too. I mean, there's a lot of nice restaurants and bars, and Walden Books is down the street as well. And I mean, I think, I'm not going to go into how Oakland's perceived, but yeah, it's good.
But you're right. I mean, there's a lot of coded language that people use when they talk about Oakland, and they, inconvenient and difficult is all like code language for. There's some racist undertones going on there that are very unpleasant. Anyway, But the festival's going great, and it's all good. So let's dive into these questions. Who's going to start?
Okay, first, when is the Seattle International Film Festival?
It starts on
SIFF Noir City.
SIFF Noir City. It starts on February 10th, and it goes, I guess, through the 16th. I believe it is.
That sounds right.
I'll have to check. I will be there on the 10th, 11th, and 12th, introducing films. I think that is a total of 10 movies in those 3 days. And then I hand over the reins to our colleague Vince Keenan and his wife Rosemary, who will be introducing the weeknight shows after that. I think weekday and weeknight shows. I think Monday might have matinee shows. And Vince, of course, the redoubtable former editor-in-chief of the Noir City magazine. Were you at the theater when I made the formal in-person announcement that Imogen is taking over as the editor of the Noir City magazine?
I don't think I was.
Maybe I know that you had dinner with Imogen during the festival.
Uh-huh. Yeah, we did.
And but yes, Imogen Sarah Smith, whom I introduced as the finest writer on film working today, because I believe it. She was taking over as the editor-in-chief of the magazine, starting with the next issue. So I like having my editorial meetings in bars, which we did.
It's very old-fashioned of you.
Very old-fashioned. As I said, I like to follow in my dad's footsteps. So, it's like going to the old M&M downtown. And I just couldn't be happier. I just think the world of Imogen. She's just such a great writer and such a loyalist, and she's just wonderful. So that's all good.
Okay, now let's start with questions.
Okay.
And this is from Mike in Chicago. While attending the festival at the Music Box Theater, I had the opportunity to view for the first time Night Has a Thousand Eyes, featuring Edward G. Robinson. My question, would you know or believe that Robinson's character, John Triton, may have been an influence on Stephen King's character, John Coffey, in The Green Mile? The ability to see into the future and the torment that accompanies that gift seems to mirror Triton's dilemma.
That's funny. I think I've seen The Green Mile. I'm pretty sure I've seen The Green Mile. That's a Frank Darabont movie, right? Isn't it? I believe it is. Anyway, but I've thought that the obvious Stephen King story that came out of that was The Dead Zone.
Yeah.
The novel was turned into a movie starring Christopher Walken as the guy who is cursed with the ability of precognition, or whatever you want to call it. And I felt that was clearly, I don't want to say it was based on Night Has a Thousand Eyes. I mean, it's not the only story about a guy who can see the fates of people. And so I don't know about The Green Mile, but if Mike, if you haven't seen The Dead Zone, that's the one that really feels like Night Has a Thousand Eyes.
Yeah, it was directed by David Cronenberg.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, that Cronenberg without body horror. There's no body horror in The Dead Zone.
It was a change of pace for me. It was a good movie. I saw that in the theater with my mom, actually.
I think that was when Cronenberg was trying to, all these very eclectic and distinctive directors, they all have their shot at proving that they can make like a normal big Hollywood movie.
Yeah.
Right? Remember, David, when David Lynch did Dune for Dino De Laurentiis, it was like, I can do this. And it worked out a little better for Cronenberg and with The Dead Zone. But then God love him, he got to go back to doing his own weirdly specific and eccentric films. So yeah, The Dead Zone is, I'll check out The Green Mile, but again, because I don't really remember much about it.
Yeah, and I think too, a lot of times with those directors, like they do some Hollywood films, more studio type product, and then they really don't necessarily enjoy the experience and really want to go back to something where they have a little more control and less studio notes.
Yeah, exactly. I'm sure people listening to us can think of a million examples of a an independent director who suddenly got the reins of a big Hollywood movie, and it's like sometimes that doesn't work out too well.
Yeah.
Okay, here we go. I'm going to James in Minneapolis, Minnesota says, I've read about Hugo Haas's films and have been trying to track them down for a while now. One or two of them are available for streaming, but the rest seem to be unavailable in any format, except for a few very lo-fi YouTube uploads. Does the Film Noir Foundation have any plans to restore these movies, and will they ever see the light of day again? Well, that's an interesting question. Somebody should do like a Hugo Haas set. I think that would be pretty extraordinary. But the movies are not lost. They are, most of them are well cared for. They're either at Sony, that has the Columbia Library, or at now owned by Disney, which is an interesting thought because a lot of those pictures were released by 20th Century Fox, and Disney now controls that archive. So the movies are there. I know that I think One Girl's Confession has gotten a release, and I think Pickup has gotten a release. I'm not positive. I think there are probably three. The one I love is The Other Woman, which I've shown at Noir City, and which is really his great Hollywood satire, if you will. But they're not lost, but they're just trying to figure out how to get them out of this hostage situation. I mean, it's interesting. I think more than a lot of movies from that era, you know, quote unquote noir movies from that era, I think the Hugo Haas films are marketable. I mean, they would be marketed as like Sex Camp or something. That sounds like a title of a film, Sex Camp.
I think that's a slasher film from the 80s.
Yeah, Sex Camp. But you know, so here's the thing, James, don't fret. The movies aren't lost, but it would be nice to have them released. The Film Noir Foundation won't have anything to do with it because those pictures are owned by those studios, and we would just be spending money that they should be spending themselves. So what I can do is try to show more of them on TCM and generate more interest in Hugo Haas's work, and then maybe someone will take the bait and say, you know, we should put these out on Blu-ray or DVD or something. I mean, we're not going to pay the Film Noir Foundation doesn't like to pay licensing fees to the studios in order to do a Blu-ray project or something like that, because it's just not where we should be spending our money. But that doesn't mean I can't try to convince some of these studios that there is a market for this stuff. So that's what we'll be working on.
Yeah, and if people want to help us with our actual restoration projects, you can donate at filmnoirfoundation.org. You donate $20 or more and sign up on our mailing list, you get the digital version of Noir City Magazine.
Yes, and should we tell people that, you know, there is now a print edition, but you don't get the print edition for a donation. The print edition has to be purchased separately. And it's great. Some of the people who watch us and have written to me and said, you know, have you tried this alternative to Amazon or this other thing? Because they've heard me kind of grouse that Amazon takes all the money, you know, for the print edition, which costs, I think, $15, and they take 13 of it. Yeah. But that's because they have the ability to print it, right? And deliver it so rapidly that people are satisfied with it. But it would be nice if there was some kind of arrangement where we actually got more for each individual issue. But that's why we request that you donate to the foundation, and then if you want a print edition, you can get one, but it's an additional cost. Okay, and this is interesting. You have a high-end question.
Yeah, so this is from WM. Would you agree that Hugo Haas is the Edward D. Wood of noir? And I say this with all due respect and admiration.
I would not, because I was never convinced that Ed Wood had any idea that he knew what he was doing.
Yeah.
And Hugo Haas clearly knew what he was doing.
Yeah.
He was a very, very accomplished theater director back in Czechoslovakia. And, he was, if he was making a movie that was kind of cheap and shoddy, he was well aware of the fact that it was cheap and shoddy. But he was also very sophisticated, and he was having a good time. He was having great fun. This may shock WM, but I always, whenever I talk about Hugo Haas, the association I make is with the Coen brothers, not because they make the same kind of movies or anything, but he knew the formula that would allow him to keep making movies. And the Coen brothers are the same way. They have established their brand, like Hugo Haas had a brand, and they know to make a movie for a certain amount of money. They were able to attract really good people to be in the films, and they always did it their way, and that's exactly what Hugo Haas did back in the 1950s. I mean, he knew that this emigre guy from Czechoslovakia wasn't going to be given a big major film to direct. There were a couple of those that he did that were okay, but he was more himself when he was just off doing his own thing on a low budget. So I get what the suggestion is here. Like, he made kind of charmingly goofy low budget movies, but I think Hugo Haas is far more talented than Ed Wood.
Yeah.
Okay, Brian in Toronto says, I just finished watching Blues in the Night. It is often described as being in the noir style and as a musical that was not very successful when released. I don't recall it being mentioned on Ask Eddie. Seems like a noir in the lighting and cinematography, and parts of the plot involve gangsters and a femme fatale. And there are some great people in the cast, including Elia Kazan, who was in that movie. I was just wondering what your take is on the film, and of course, is it noir or not in your view? Have you seen this movie, Anne?
I have not. It's on my list of things to see, but sort of finding it.
Yeah. I'm if memory serves, it is an Anatol Litvak directed film, and it's good because it's about, of course, being made, I think, in 1941 or something. It's about a white jazz combo that gets in all this trouble, but it certainly is a good jazz movie, and there are a lot of African American jazz musicians in it. And it's just borderline. I mean, it has kind of a noir look, but it's not a full-on film noir. But it is a really interesting attempt to do kind of a quasi musical about music that wasn't common in movie musicals of the time. I mean, more jazz and blues and stuff. And so that makes it really interesting. I've never shown it at a festival. I would show it on Noir Alley for sure if the possibility presented itself. And I think I probably somewhere, I think they're still holding on to a formal noir or not from Noir Alley where I talk about Blues in the Night. So that may pop up on the internet one of these days.
And I just also wanted to recommend the book Music in the Shadows, Noir Musical Films by Sherry Chinden Bison, which it looks like this. Sorry, I forgot to reverse my camera before I got in here. So you've seen it backwards. But
yeah, that's pretty good. I have that book over here as well. And there's a couple of other ones too, specifically. I think there's one called Jazz Noir that talks about specifically jazz, as opposed to that book, which is a little more wide ranging.
Yeah.
But that is a good book. Okay.
What are your thoughts on the Elvis Presley movie King Creole being a film noir? And that's from Sherry.
I'll go along with that. I mean, that if people always say, is there an Elvis noir? And it's like, yeah, it's King Creole. It's not Jailhouse Rock. People think it's Jailhouse Rock, but it's not. It's King Creole. And it's great. I mean, Michael Curtiz, and it's great supporting cast with Walter Matthau and Carolyn Jones. It's good. I mean, people have pestered me for years to show it as part of the festival. And who knows, maybe we'll do King Creole and Blues in the Night as a double bill
Yeah.
at some point, and it'll be musical noir night, you know.
And did somebody write an article on King Creole, a Noir Not article for
I
Noir
believe
City
so.
Magazine?
I believe
Yeah.
so. That was a while back. I can't
Yeah, it was before
remember.
we were the kind of what we are now.
Yeah, yeah.
So we wouldn't have a back issue of it because I think that was a while ago.
Yeah, that was a while ago. Who knows? Maybe it was Will Viharo
I think it was Will.
because Will was the number one campaigner for you have to show King Creole because it's noir, you know.
Yeah.
So okay, so Linda in Minnesota. We've got a few Minnesotans here today. Says, what are some of your favorite examples of architecture in noir? That's kind of interesting. Boy, I should have prepared for that question. It does. I'll vamp while I try to think of some of these by commenting that I've recently met this woman, Christina Madrid French, who wrote. She's now living in San Francisco, and she wrote this book called The Architecture of Suspense about architecture in the films of Alfred Hitchcock. And she's also now works for San Francisco Heritage and is involved in the project to save the seats at the Castro Theater, which is kind of interesting. And you know, she writes a whole thing about how important the architecture is in Hitchcock's films, like North by Northwest and Vertigo and stuff like that. But any specific examples you can think of, Anne, of like structures and architecture in noir that is particularly gripping?
Losi's remake of M, I think, and there was just one other one. Oh, the Mickey Spillane that we showed at Christmas.
Oh, I the Jury. Yeah. Well,
The Jury.
both of those
Bradbury
feature the Bradbury building. Yeah. So
Which is
yes,
not in New York, by the
there
way.
is that. You know, there is that.
And of course, that building is also used in Blade Runner.
Yes, yes, indeed. It's interesting because there are the films that use existing architecture, like the ones you've just cited, and of course, all the stuff that was made around Bunker Hill in Los Angeles is really intriguing, just because the architecture, the way those structures were built on those hills, is so compelling. And you know, you just see the Second Street Tunnel and Bunker Hill and Angel's Flight and the tenement buildings, those apartment buildings, which are featured prominently in Night Has a Thousand Eyes, which is where Edward G. Robinson ends up living. You see a lot of that area in Cry Danger. But there's that, and then there's the stuff that is made, architecture that is made for the film. Like, it was funny the other night when I was introducing the big clock at the festival.
Oh yeah.
You know, I made that joke about how it's in the novel, the big clock is a metaphor, but when they bought the book, Paramount was like, well, if we call it the big clock, people are going to want to see a big clock. so they incorporated it into the film, and they built this big, you know, mock clock in the middle of this giant high-rise office building. And it was spectacular. You know, it's just a spectacular set, but it's not real at all. I wish, Linda, I was giving you a better answer here, because I'm just thinking of like, and I'm thinking, when I think of architecture, I think of the exteriors of buildings as opposed to the stuff I love in the interiors. Like, I made a big fuss at the festival about Jeffy's Roadhouse, you know, in the movie Roadhouse, because it's such a beautiful place that doesn't actually exist.
Yeah.
The thought of that place being ripped apart when the movie was done just kills me, because it's like, no, I want to go there. I want to bowl there, and then I want to drink there, and I want to listen to Ida Lupino sing. So I'm just trying to think. I mean,
so the house on Haunted Hill, that film, has that, because it has a really interesting exterior, has that ever been used in a film noir?
I don't know. I don't know. I mean, I'm kind of taking a big swing and a miss at this question because my head is so filled with the movies. It's like I'm trying to pick out these locations, there's and it's so funny because now my brain is fixated on, I think I mentioned to you how I was recently on the Warner Brothers backlot shooting promos and stuff for TCM and the Warner's Centennial. And it was so interesting to see all the facades, that you've seen in a million movies, the Parisian street in Casablanca, the tenement buildings, the Midwest street, they call it Hennessy Street is the name of the New York street on the Warner's back lot. And so, I mean, I'm just curious, does that count as the architecture? Because it's not real, it's just the fronts of the buildings. And but it's so evocative and it's so interesting how they can be adapted, and it was fabulous because you realize that all these things were built like in the late 20s and the early 1930s for that period. And at the time they were like contemporary.
Yeah.
So because they didn't want to pay to go to New York to shoot stuff or go to Chicago to shoot stuff, they just wanted to do it right there on the lot. And now, of course, they only shoot period stuff unless it's a part of New York that still looks exactly like that. But now it's much more economical to just go there and shoot in the actual location. So they don't, but man, that was just exciting to be on the lot and, walking down the same street as Edward G. Robinson and Bogart and Betty Davis and everything. It was really cool. Anyway, we went totally sideways on that question because I just didn't have many good answers.
Do you know there was a book that was written about Bunker Hill's location and films? Do you remember what the title of that is? Because I'm blanking on it.
It's something like an LA noir thing, or I mean, there's a lot of books called LA noir, but I know exactly the book you're talking about, and I think it mentioned Bunker Hill in the subhead of the book, not in the title proper, but it is sort of like an LA noir, the history of Bunker Hill or something like that. Yeah. It's funny. There was this is kind of lost to time, I think, but several years ago, I did a noir walking tour of downtown LA for an app that had just been developed. I think it was called Detour. And I mean, I did this gig and I got paid for it. And I have absolutely no idea what ever became of it or if people use this app or whatever. But it was like travel guides that you could download into your phone and then put your headphones on and, walk to the corner and turn left and you will see blah, blah, blah. And anyway, I did that for that whole area downtown, like the Bradbury Building and the Grand Central Market and Angel's Flight and the $1 Million Theater and all that stuff. And I've never heard it. I just recorded it. I never heard the final version and I never did it.
Yeah.
But I never took the tour once it was done. I mean, I remember recording it and of course trying to get clean recordings, walking around down there with some wonderful encounters with some of the denizens of downtown Los Angeles while you're recording this stuff. And it's just like, right on this spot, Raymond Chandler lived on the hill. Hey, buddy, you got a book? I need it. It's like a lot of those outtakes. Okay. I think it's you now.
Yeah. Richard in Baltimore asks, I recently watched the Fox DVD No Way Out. I always enjoy your insightful commentaries on DVDs, but was struck by your opening statement on this one. I have seen more of these films than is healthy for any normal human. My excuse is I write about them. For those of us who do not write about them, how many films can one watch in a given period and still remain sane? Sorry. Uh,
Still remain a normal,
normal,
healthy
healthy
human.
human. My film noir database indicates I've watched 204 films in the past 4 months, and my wife is very concerned. Help me reassure her my mental health is intact.
I can't do that. I can't do that, Richard. But 204 films in 4 months that's a lot of movies.
That's a lot
right?
of movies.
And I mean, I can't, 24 films in 10 days at Noir City is a lot of movies. As we discussed at the top, you start to get a little, you suffer from noir delirium. I mean, when I made that comment, obviously I was making a joke. I was being facetious, but I don't think there's any harm in watching too many movies, right? Especially good ones. So I don't know about that, but there was a guy who approached me at the festival who had a list that he had compiled, and he was up to like 758 titles or something.
Yeah.
And he showed me his alphabetized list of all the film noir movies he had seen, but he said, "This is killing me because I don't have any that start with an X or a Z." And he's like, Eddie, you got to tell me a movie that starts with X or Z because I can't stand looking at this list and having blanks there. So, and X the Unknown is not really a film noir. And so I don't, there is now X.
Yeah.
Right. The movie X.
The movie X. Yeah.
And I can't in any way call that a film noir.
No.
So that doesn't help. There is a Z. I just discovered there is a Z, a movie called Zigzag that was made in 1970 with George Kennedy. I have not seen it, but I've read the plot description and it sounds fairly noirish, but I not having seen the movie, I can't say. But I think you'll be fine, Richard. I think you'll be fine. Just don't watch noir movies while you're in a moving vehicle.
Yeah.
Especially if you're driving. Other than that, I think you'll be okay. But trying to get the spouse to share your obsession can be a very dangerous thing.
Yeah.
So find your tribe. That's what I say, Richard. Yeah. Find your tribe.
You don't want to give her ideas about insurance.
Yeah. Somebody said to me last night that it was like they were so thrilled that they had finally convinced their wife to sit down and watch a noir film. Yeah. And it was interesting. And I do feel a sense of accomplishment when people tell me that the introductions on Noir Alley, or I guess in the theater, help prime the pump for the recalcitrant who are like, I'm not going to watch this because this guy said, he was watching. I was presenting Thunder Road on TCM, and his wife was like, no, and then she heard my intro. And he was giving me credit for she actually said, yeah, okay, I'm going to watch this. Yeah. And he was giving me credit when, of course, she was watching it because of Robert Mitchum, I'm sure.
That would be Robert Mitchum.
Yeah, she says, ooh, this is interesting. Maybe I'll watch this one, yeah. So, and no harm in watching as much noir as possible. I remember when I used to watch creature features, Bob Wilkins would have this sign on the wall, watch horror movies, keep America strong. And now I should get one. I should put it up in here. It says, watch noir, keep America paranoid, keep America desperate. Okay. Me now. Okay. This is Marjorie in Connecticut. She says, in Double Indemnity, we know this one. In Double Indemnity, why does the door on Fred McMurray's apartment open out instead of like any other apartment door? Does anyone have a reason for that? Yes, you know that one, right,
Yeah,
Anne?
so Barbara Stanwyck can hide.
It's so Barbara Stanwyck can hide behind the door. Yes, exactly. Uh, I love that because it reminds me of, and that was Billy Wilder's thing when they told him, Billy, doors don't open into the hallway, they open into the apartment. And he said, yeah, but then the scene isn't any good. Then I can't have the shot of her hiding behind the door while you see Edward G. Robinson at the end of the hallway talking to Fred McMurray.
Yeah.
He says, it's no good if she's in the apartment. It isn't nearly as suspenseful. And they said, yeah, but it's absurd. Doors don't work that way. He says, well, they do in this shot. And it's like, and it's funny that, Marjorie noticed it. A lot of people notice it, but it's amazing how many people don't.
I never really noticed. I was too obsessed about the concept of having a houseboy that I think that like how great it would be to have a houseboy, and we need that to come back.
Oh my God. It's amazing. Just watch younger people in the theater when they see these films and they are like, what is this? Like when The Domestic comes out in virtually every one of these movies, right? Even if the person is not some, affluent character, there's like a maid, and they're like, I don't understand. What is this? Who is that person? Why are they in the house? What are they doing?
Yeah, and there are people that like would clean multiple houses. That was definitely more common in London still. But, I have someone who cleans my house every 4 weeks because I work 2 jobs. I want people to bring that back. And it's so funny because I remember talking to a woman at the place who made more money than I am. She goes, I don't know, because she had a kid too, and she worked really hard. And I was like, well, when you do that, I mean, disproportionately, that's women and women of color who do that work. So, it's really a feminist thing to do when push comes to shove because you're giving work to someone else.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh no, we had a person who came in, a couple, in fact, who came in every couple of weeks, but COVID put an end to that because and now I learned to take care of my own house. So
yeah, well, my mother, you could eat off her floors, even though she had 4 children and 6
nice.
And I just feel like I think that's part of it is I want my house to be a certain level of cleanliness that I cannot achieve.
And of course, when you have pets, it becomes somewhat problematic.
Man, yes, because they vacuum my couch, which I would never do.
Well, I actually have to get the rugs in our house. I have finally gotten this device that allows me to scrape the cat hair.
Yeah.
Off of the rugs and the couches and the chairs and stuff because Tizzy just sheds like crazy. Yeah. Anyway. How did we digress into our housekeeping?
I was talking about houseboys. I need
okay,
one.
Yeah, houseboys, exactly. Yeah. Okay, so I think it's you now. Yes.
And this is from Lauren. I'm assuming this is Lauren from Chicago. Could be somebody else. I want to comment on this debate of can a noir film be a comedy? Well, I found one. In fact, it is the last film shown this year on Noir Alley, Mr. Soft Touch, starring your favorite actor, Glenn Ford. The 25 minutes is an action noir. Then the next hour is that comedic, and Bob Hope could be in the role at this point. But then the gangsters come back and the film finishes as a noir. Do you think I'm right?
Well, yeah. I mean, well, wait a second, Lord. I showed it on Noir Alley, so I must think that there's some noir credibility to the movie. And yeah, it certainly has its comedic aspects. I mean, these films that are comedies that are using the noir atmosphere and tropes of the genre and stuff, I don't consider them. I'm never going to put them on a list of like the top 50 noir films, but they clearly wouldn't exist in the way they are without referencing noir and being so. It's the DNA, the noir DNA is in these films, but they do something different with it. And we're showing Unfaithfully Yours at the Noir City Festival here in Oakland, and then we're showing it again up in Seattle. And to me, that's the most noir comedy of them all, because it actually is a comedy about the murderous psychology of this man, right? I
Yeah.
mean, and it's making fun of those impulses that are at the core of noir. Like, my wife is cheating on me, I'm gonna get even, I'm gonna kill her.
Yeah.
And Preston Sturges turns that into comedy, which
Yeah.
is pretty subversive and pretty remarkable. uh and Mr. Soft Touch, it was more an instance of they couldn't figure out what they wanted the movie to be, so they said, what if we did both things?
Yeah.
What if we made it a light romantic comedy when Glenn Ford is with the Evelyn Keyes character, but when he's alone, it's kind of a noir, because he checks off all the boxes of a noir protagonist. He's vengeance because they sold his nightclub out from under him, and then they kill a buddy of his and all this stuff. And as he points out, as Lauren points out, there's action and there's all the criminal elements. But then in the settlement home where Evelyn Keyes, is this wonderful angelic social worker, then it becomes a different kind of thing entirely. So it's a very interesting film because, two directors, Henry Levin and Gordon Douglas, and they each have a different way of approaching the material. And I wish I knew exactly what the idea was at the studio, whether they just planned it that way or whether they got halfway through and said, this isn't working, let's juice it up with action, or it's too much action, let's put the romance and the comedy in. I don't know the answer to that, but it's an interesting, enjoyable movie.
Yeah. And I think too, kind of the effective part of that is just that you kind of get this middle period where things are looking up, and you kind of get this idea maybe like there's redemption and stuff like that. So when it turns again at the end, it's really like a gut punch, because you've seen it turn into something else, and this glimmer and hopeful. And I think that's really well done.
Yeah, but it is
Really
surprising.
works.
The end of the film is very surprising,
Mhm.
that it turns as dark as it does.
Yeah.
And if it's like a Rorschach test, if you're essentially a positive person, you assume that it's a happy ending. If you're not, you can very easily assume the worst, and it's just like the film has faded out. But there's no guarantees that that character is going to live beyond the fade out.
Yeah.
Okay, let's Doug in Santa Ana. Frustratingly, some of your highly admired noirs are literally unobtainium. I think he means, I don't know what that is. Is that a word?
Yeah,
Unobtainable.
it's from Avatar,
Oh,
because they
okay.
can't find
Unobtainium.
unobtainium.
Unobtainium. Okay,
Yeah,
very good. Well, just shows you haven't seen Avatar.
I haven't either.
On disc or streaming from the usual suspects. I have struck pay dirt a few times with the Internet Archive. What do you think? I'm not entirely sure what the question is. Yeah, a lot of these films are not obtainable in great. If I'm not sure what Doug is asking. Do I approve of the use of the Internet Archive for?
Well, with Internet Archive, I believe they only put in public domain stuff.
They're supposed to do that,
Yeah.
and we've encountered some issues with, and we've discussed this on
Yeah.
previous episodes. Like, if people are going to watch the Film Noir Foundation restorations and stream them for free,
Yeah.
Please do that on Canopy, which is through the library system.
Yeah.
Which I have no issues with whatsoever. I kind of do take issue with the pirates who upload films, to the Internet Archive or to YouTube or something. And we get nothing out of that, so our hard work is just given away. Canopy is cool because they make a deal with the producer, manufacturer, distributor, whatever, of the films to buy the rights to put it on Canopy. But it's a very nominal thing because everybody knows it's like when an author sells their book is sold to a library.
Yeah.
It's great, but what's different is, of course, when it's sold to a library as a physical book, all these different libraries are buying it. So it's a big chunk of your print run gets sold to libraries because it's a physical copy. It's very different with Canopy because they really only need one, right? Once the film is uploaded, any library card anywhere in the world can access that film. There doesn't have to be multiple copies of it or anything. So that initial purchase is kind of important. Otherwise, we're just giving the work away. Anyway, that's my idea. But again, I'm not going to make a big fuss about it because I do think it's very important that stuff just be accessible. If you look really hard, you can find, Eddie Muller books and access them as PDFs on the internet and not get them in a way that anybody's making any money off of it. I don't appreciate it, but it's okay because, that stuff may be there in 60 years, maybe, when, I'm long gone and the books are long gone and everything. You may still be able to find this stuff. So philosophically, I have no massive objection to it. It's just like there is a ecosystem here, an economic ecosystem that sort of makes sense if people should get paid for the work that they've done is all I'm saying. So
yeah, and I think that, I mean, I don't want to get too off on this, but I think there's now an expectation almost that, if you want to create things and be artistic, like you should give your work away for free because somehow you're doing it for art's sake. And of course, people want to write and express themselves artistically, but it's labor. And you should get paid for your labor. I mean, if you're working in an office and someone comes up to you and says, well, we don't want to pay you because you love being an engineer, so why should we pay you? No one would say that. Could you say, wait a minute, I work hard at this and so
well, it goes to show you, the amount of respect that artists get in this culture is like nil.
Yeah.
And I completely agree with what you're saying. If you and honestly, that's because of the rise of the internet. Because
totally. It's completely.
It just devours content, and so people became very used to this idea that I'm just going to post this and put this out there, and then it's like, oh, a penny or two every time you click something, and it's just weird. I mean, and the expectation. And I know this when I started publishing, it was the same thing. It would be like, well, here's the deal that we're giving you. You better take it, because if you don't take this crummy deal, there's 100 people behind you who will take it.
Yeah.
Because they just want to see their name on a book and be a published author. And at a certain point, the publishers were like, we don't really care what it is. We just have to fill up our catalog with a certain number of books. And it was understood that 2 or 3 of these books would sell like crazy, and the rest of them just make you look like a publisher that's doing a lot of business,
Yeah.
But the money is nothing, So we'll see how it goes. But it is kind of interesting how, it's a big philosophical question, but bigger than we are going to grapple with right here. Having this conversation.
And I just want to say too, that the Internet Archive is a fantastic resource for old time radio. If you want to get into old time radio, and there's been some groups that have really cleaned up the audio and things like that and put them up there, so you can get some really high quality downloads from there for old time radio. That's it.
It's great. Okay. Where are we
This
here?
this is mine, and this is
Okay.
from Wes. My favorite program, and the main reason I pay for TCM is Noir Alley, and it's no longer being shown in my Canadian region. What can I do?
Wes, that is a tough one. I get this every single week when I check in on social media to see how people are enjoying the film that I've chosen to show. There's a lot of bitching from Canadians about they're not showing it up here. And you know, there isn't a lot you can do because unless there's some united Canadian front that talks to the powers that be, which is now Warner Brothers Discovery. There's nothing that's going to change because the reason that happens is the films that we show all have different rights situations, and so it can be TCM would get broadcast rights for North America. That's great. But if they only have broadcast rights for the United States, then it's not going to show in Canada. And when I pick a film, I don't ask. Like, is this going to show in Canada or not? Because if it's a film I want to show, I'm going to show it because either it's really good. We haven't shown it before. There's some backstories that I really am enthusiastic about relating. But I don't ask. So is this one going to be in Canada or not? Sorry, Canadians, but it's beyond my control, and I really, I can't not show a film to the American audience because it's not available to the Canadian audience. I can't do that. So until the studios change their things and make them available everywhere, that's just not going to change as far as I can tell. All right, so Howard says there's a lot of Noir Alley questions today, which I don't normally like to talk about that because I could conceivably get into trouble. But
well, we can talk about things like the distribution, because I think people don't understand how that works.
Yeah, I know
it's region rights and stuff like that, and sometimes that's the reason why you can't do things.
Precisely. And I have certainly spent a lot of time at the festival talking to people who are fans of the Noir Alley show and explaining to them like that TCM doesn't own all these movies.
Yeah.
So just because you've seen it once on TCM doesn't mean you're going to see it again anytime soon. Or when they complain about it showing too many times, it's because they're trying to fulfill the number of broadcasts they have paid for.
Yeah.
Right. So that's just how the business works right now. Okay. So Howard says, will or can Eddie please show on Noir Alley 2 films I'd love to see? 1, The Third Voice, and 2, The Crimson Canary. Not noir, perhaps, but some of my favorite jazz musicians appear in that. And for me, that's noir enough. And several arresting noirs, which I've seen, but not on TCM. Plunder Road. It's interesting because Third Voice and Plunder Road, of course, are both by Hubert Cornfield, is the director of both of those. Such a Pretty Little Beach. Ah, yes. Gloomy and existential French film, which I have shown at Noir City as part of the International Festival. It's wonderful. And The Devil Strikes at Night, which I've also shown at Noir City. Siadmac's great movie.
And you've shown The Third Voice at Noir City as well.
I have. I've actually shown all of these films at Noir City, but none of them on Noir Alley yet. I would love to show The Third Voice and Plunder Road. They're both on my list of titles I'm asking about. Like, can we get these and show them? I believe they were both distributed by 20th Century Fox. So, there's a little complication there. It's not as easy to get Fox films anymore on TCM as it used to be, but not impossible. But those are both on the list. I can pretty much guarantee you're not going to see Such a Pretty Little Beach, it would be on my list of potential films if we really leaned hard into the international. And honestly, I think I said on here at one point that we were looking at adding an international annex on TCM, which has not come to pass just because there's been some tumultuous things going on that have kind of put major programming changes a bit on hold. But that is not an indication of anything other than we're not going to do that right now. So, in both the Philippe Girard film and the Devil Strikes at Night would be on a short list of things I would want to show. I'm so happy that The Devil Strikes at Night is now available on Blu-ray.
Yeah.
That is from Kino. It's just a great film. Okay.
And this is from Hunt. Hi, Eddie. As a fan of film noir, I've become interested in the group of French films from the 30s that are often called poetic realism. Films like Le Jour se lève, La Croix de Brooms, and Hotel du Nord, all by Carnet. Do you consider these to be early forms of noir? Do you think that they inspired American directors and screenwriters who went on to make noir films? These films, which apparently predate American noirs, seem to have a lot of the ingredients of noir films, yet are often not included in most discussions of the genre.
I do consider them to be part of the history of noir. I don't know. It's hard to determine how much influence they had on anything. I think of the films you mentioned, the film that had more influence was Duvivier's Pepe Le Moko, which definitely was a film noir and showed the romanticism of the criminal underworld and all that, and was a more influential film than any of those other three. Of course, Le Jour se lève, known as Daybreak when it was shown in America, that was remade at RKO, and I think 47 or 48 as The Long Night, with Henry Fonda, and which is pretty much a lost film. I mean, I don't think it's lost, but for some reason it has kind of disappeared. And I'm wondering, go ahead.
I was going to say, because at one time Kino had it on videotape.
Okay, but it's interesting. I sometimes wonder if there's underlying rights issues with some of this stuff, because it's the same thing as The 13th Letter, which of course was based on Le Corbeau, Henri-Georges Clouzot's film. And then The 13th Letter is virtually unseen now, the Otto Preminger version of that, the same way that Anatole Litvak's version of Daybreak has kind of disappeared. You never see The Long Night. I think TCM has shown it once, but I mean, I would love to show it on Noir Alley, but it just never pops up under available films, so I don't know what that is. And but yeah, those films, and Port of Shadows, which is the Quai de Brume, is they're all Gabin films.
Yeah.
And clearly Gabin is the French Humphrey Bogart, and so he's very, very influential, more so than the writers or directors. I mean, Gabin is what made the difference with those movies and made them international successes. The answer is I absolutely consider them part of film noir. I can't state, I'll just reiterate, I cannot state for a fact that they were inspiring directors in Hollywood to do films in exactly the same way, because the French films are different.
Yeah.
They just have a different tone that didn't translate to the American versions. Like if you've seen the version of La Bête Humaine with Gabin, and then the Fritz Lang version made in America, it's like you can't imagine a more different handling of that material. And Gabin's character is nothing like Glenn Ford's character. And it's just the Renoir version is much more affecting and much deeper than the Fritz Lang version. But anyway, I hope folks will look for these films and find them if they're unfamiliar with them. Okay, Jeff from Brooklyn says, I've always had an appreciation for American films. Good. In my 20s, I realized that style played an important part in movies, especially film noir. At my current age, I'm interested in film noir from other countries. Hey, not England or Spain, but Germany, Japan, or maybe Italy, and so on. Is there a film noir culture in other European countries? Well, again, Anne, thanks for positioning these. There absolutely is. I mean, this was the biggest revelation in my work. Once I kind of established the festival and had written a couple of books and everything, and then traveled to other countries, that was the eye opener. Mm-hmm. It's like, wow, here we were thinking this was an American phenomenon, and it was not, and the fact that we've restored these films from Argentina, there's a massive range of films from Mexico that are noir. Certainly in Japan, all the Yakuza movies and everything. The films in Japan, the noir thing kind of hit a little bit later in Japan, right? But in France, they were obviously doing it from the 1930s. In Italy, it kind of started in the, Possessione, Visconti's film was in the early 40s. But it was really when Antonioni made Story of a Love Affair that noir kind of started happening in Italy. There's a great deal of it. Germany, certainly. We just talked about The Devil Strikes at Night, and Black Gravel was another one that I know people loved. Anyway, the answer is unequivocally yes. There are examples of noir everywhere. And this is also Jeff. This is also my big interest now is finding examples of noir that were contemporaneous with the movement in Hollywood, and just saying, hey, look, they were doing this in other countries as well.
Okay, so this is from our friend Alan Rossi. Before I ever knew of Eddie Muller, one night a fellow noir movie buff drove me to a 4-story building near Market Street in San Francisco. We go up in this tiny elevator, the doors open to a typical looking office appears, lights dimmed, a 16 millimeter film projector in the center of it, mostly men, all movie buffs. A movie was about to start and Eddie did the introduction, mainly talking about the sad life of Gloria Graham. Eddie did what he now does on TCM. He was remarkable as he is now. Eddie, where exactly was this? Do you remember such a group?
Yes, I do remember such a group. And did you ever go to these screenings?
No, it kind of had faded out when I moved down here, so yeah. I never got to go.
Yeah, it was called the Danger and Despair Knitting Circle, and it was run by a guy named Mark Dolezal. And it's interesting. I mean, and Mark would do this. He wasn't. He on occasion would find a 16 millimeter film that was owned by somebody else. Mostly, Paul Meyenberg was the guy who had.
Oh, Paul, yeah.
Paul. He was a film collector,
mm-hmm.
But Mark was running a cottage industry selling DVD copies of noir films, right? And it was piracy. It was out and out piracy, right? But the films just weren't available then. So it was like, this is all a good thing. So this kind of dovetails with the question before about the Internet Archive, right? Because what happened was we were doing all this and it was fun. I was not involved in Mark's business, but Mark was a buddy. And then when the film festivals started and I started dealing with the studios, it became really problematic because Mark couldn't come and sell the DVDs and stuff at the festivals, because if somebody from the studio came and saw that, we'd all be busted.
Yeah.
And we'd all go to jail. So I mean, it would be problematic. I'm not saying we'd all go to jail. I mean that kind of, you know, metaphorically. So so I honestly don't know whatever happened to Mark, but I definitely remember it was like a noir rave. I mean, these shows kind of moved around. When one was at the City Club, I think one time, and then there was I remember the building down on, it was downtown someplace, and there was even a night when the elevator got stuck. I remember that. It was like, because Mark also ran a janitorial service. And so that's how he would have access to these buildings. And then there'd be like, they were like noir raves, you know?
Yeah.
And then one night I remember him saying, don't overcrowd the elevator. It's a really finicky elevator. And somebody like jumped on, and I'll be damned if the elevator didn't get stuck between floors. And then Mark was like, don't call the fire department, whatever you do, you know? Anyway, I'm telling more tales than I should here. Because then if we called the fire department, they'd find out that he was probably using the space illegally, right? And anyway, eventually I believe the fire department did arrive because there was no other way to get the damn thing open. So so yeah, that's the story, Alan. You didn't dream it. It actually did happen. Well, that's the end. Man. That's the end. That's this episode. So, Anne, I am psyched because there are 3 more days to go. I mean, I know when people are watching this, the festival will be over, but I know that there are at this point 3 more days to go. And
Raw Deal tonight.
Raw Deal is showing tonight.
So pumped about
with He Walked by Night, which is the fantastic John Alton double bill. Mm-hmm. And then tomorrow is the big Burt Lancaster day, because it's like 3 Burt Lancaster movie. Night Has a Thousand Eyes, then All My Sons, Sorry Wrong Number, and Kiss the Blood Off My Hands, a big Lancaster bombshell that drops on Hollywood. And then we lighten things up on the last day. Of course, we'll see what happens, because the football game is against us on Sunday, right? So and the 49ers, of course, are playing against the Eagles. So I'm going to have to tell people tonight and tomorrow, like, it's the early game. So if you want to watch the football game, come to our evening show.
Yeah.
Because, you know, obviously our Sunday night shows are the least attended.
Mm-hmm. Which is weird, because that's almost always my favorite double bill. Well, I mean, that's just been consistent for me. I've always really loved the programming on Sundays, the final Sunday.
Yeah. And this time I decided to have like a palate cleanser in a way, because it's like Unfaithfully Yours and The Velvet Touch, which is a real rarity. I mean, The Velvet Touch does not show very often, and it's a beautiful 35 millimeter print. And it's like, you don't get to see Rosalind Russell in too many noir films. And she's terrific in this movie, as is Sidney Greenstreet and Claire Trevor and Leon Ames. It's good. I showed it last year at the festival in Silver Spring at the AFI, and the audience just loved it. And I said, you know, this movie plays great. I don't know why it isn't as well known as it should be, but and it's so funny, because Rosalind Russell had seen A Double Life with Ronald Coleman, and immediately, like, I got to do that.
Yeah.
You know, so she plays a Broadway actress who commits a murder and then tries to cover it up, and it's just terrific. So anyway, so the next time we do this, I'll probably be in the middle of, or just done the Seattle festival. So we'll compare notes on how things go in Seattle. But we have hit the deck running in a new year, and because I am pretty busy.
Yeah. But that's a good thing.
Absolutely. And again, I appreciate all the folks who watch, and it's been fun. Have you met a lot of people at the festival who watched the show?
Yeah, I've had a couple people come up to me and talk to me, which is always very exciting. And some people that I met the previous year that have come back again this year. So it's been very cool. And yeah, I mean, I'm just really glad that people are enjoying the show. And you know, and I actually had people say to me how surprised they were with how good the questions are that we get. And I'm like, yeah, we get really great questions.
Yeah, the questions are great. And you know, sometimes it's like, haven't we talked about this already? But I've come to understand that you know, people come in at different times,
Yeah.
and it's like it's not bad to go over the same ground every so often, especially if something has happened to kind of change things, you know,
Yeah.
which I think will be the case this year. I think by the time, if some of these questions were asked in 6 or 8 months, I might be giving a different answer, because things do change pretty radically. What I love is when people come up to me at the theater and they say, "Oh, I watch Ask Eddie and Ann. Is Ann here? Where's Ann? I want to meet Ann." You know, that's pretty cool. So that's it.
That's it.
I
Okay.
so
Um,
I hope I've seen some of you people at the festival. I know you're out there, and others. We will see you shortly up in Seattle.
and so hopefully we'll be back in 2 weeks. We got to figure out when we can record again, since you're going to be in
Yeah,
Seattle shortly.
yeah,
And
but of
then,
course this is remote, and I can do it
yeah,
from
that's
Seattle.
right. You can do it
You
from
know, it's not,
Seattle.
yeah, it'd be a
Yeah.
little change of pace. You know, people wouldn't be staring at the same backdrop.
Yeah, and I'll be going this month down to Sugar Land, Texas, because my mother is having her 90th birthday.
Oh,
So we're all
fabulous.
getting together for that. I'm very excited.
Beautiful. Well, give your mom my regards and wish her a very happy birthday for me.
I will do that. Okay, y'all. We'll see you next time.
Okay, take care, everybody. Bye.